Scott Stedman and mystery guest. Welcome to Counterintelligence.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It is so great to have you guys. Scott, I'd like to maybe start by, can you tell us a little bit about Wikistrat? And then we're going to get into our special guest here today, but maybe you could start off with just a little bit about Wikistrat, the private intelligence company.
Sure. So Wikistrat is this company that Forensic News has been looking into for the better part of a year now, I guess. And basically, they are a company that has private clients who purchase these simulations. They're geopolitical analysis type simulations where they game out certain events that may happen in the world. And so Wikistrat as a company was formed in 2010. Basically, it is mostly based in Israel. They have addresses in the United States, but most of the work is done out of Israel and remotely. And yeah, so the company does these simulations. They crowdsource intelligence from different analysts over the world and provide reports essentially to private clients. And our reporting on Wikistrat is basically thanks to our mystery guest here, Matt Penn, who was previously employed by Wikistrat, and he saw a series of alarming things with the company itself and with the founders of the company who were in the news. And based on what he saw as an analyst at Wikistrat and some communications that he was privy to, reached out to us, and thus begins our story with Matt Penn.
And Matt, I'd like to just take a quick opportunity just to thank you for not the reporting that we've done has been absolutely just a thrill to work on. But I also just want to take the opportunity to just thank you for, I don't know if the phrase is doing the right thing or like it's not, we know it from the journalism end. It's not easy to put yourself kind of, I don't know what the phrase is, Scott, but just in the spotlight. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for, for a whistleblower, right? I mean, that's what
you're welcome. And thank you for your hard work at Forensic News. I've been trying to get a lot of this information out now for over a year. And it's been a very, very frustrating and trying experience, but I'm so grateful for you guys for what you did, getting it out there, getting it published, because I didn't want to come forward until this was in the news, because I was concerned about some sort of potential retaliation against me. And I do thank you so much for your hard work.
Yeah, and it's not only that, if I could jump in here, but you made two steps. I mean, you made the decision to A, bring us the information, and now B, taking the, I think, even bigger step and coming out publicly. And now the credibility of everything that you've provided is basically confirmed, because here you are, you're a real person. You did work at Wikistrat. And so, yeah, I just want to echo Eric's words on behalf of Forensic News. Thank you. And everyone basically that cares about transparency. And that's been our goal since day one: be as transparent as possible and just provide the facts. And you've helped us do that. So yeah, I think this is a good time to jump into some of the details, Eric, if you want to kind of set up the story.
Yeah. And once again, I got to compliment you on the Matrix style background. It's just absolutely just me
recycling, but you're welcome.
It's me recycling my own joke off air, because I momentarily yeah, it looks absolutely great. Scott, I mean, there's so much I want to ask. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say. So I remember when Scott first came to me and he said, Scott, how long has Forensic News been in operation? How long have we been doing this?
We've been doing this. We're in our 7th month now, so just about half a year.
So before around the time you contacted us, or I guess when you contacted us, I got a message from Scott. He said, we have our first, I don't know if you said whistleblower, Scott, but I was like thrilled. Like someone wants to talk to us in this capacity. Scott, you think maybe we could take us through, both of you actually, the initial, like when that happened and kind of just the beginning of our relationship working together?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start from our end. We first got Matt first reached out to us, I think about 2.5 months ago now.
It's like August or September or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a few months. First, just as anonymous through a tip form on our website. And I think from our end, why we took it seriously from the get-go was because he had all these documents to back up what he was saying. A lot of the time in our, in the journalism world, we get tipsters and we get leakers, whistleblowers, but they only have their word. And that is powerful sometimes. But when you have the documents that were presented to us right off the bat, we took it as a sign of credibility. So yeah, we started this about 3 months ago. We worked diligently for a month and a half, and then we produced the first report on what Matt found suspicious and what Matt found worth blowing the whistle over. And if you want to describe some of that conduct now, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, let me first start with how I joined Wikistrat in October of 2013. I'd actually, in the summer of 2013, I'd seen stories about Wikistrat, and it sounded like a real interesting concept. So I applied, and I was really shocked. I received an interview, and I joined in October of 2013 and I started as an analyst. Basically, an analyst is basically just someone who is part, okay, just to back up for a second, Wikistrat does two types of projects or simulations, as we call them. The first is an internal simulation. And what that means is it's some random topic that's very popular in the news, and it's usually open to anyone who wants to participate. And we game out whatever the topic is, and it's not paid. It's not for a client. It's just Wikistrat gets this out there to generate buzz and news and interest for the site. The second type of project is known as an external simulation, and that is for a client. And that generally is not open to anyone. It's usually we pick specific people, both within our analyst pool, but also we go out and recruit people who might have the specific expertise or skills we need for that project. Starting in the end of 2016, I was I basically received a promotion. I became a recruiter for Wikistrat, and that's what I did. Was anytime we had an external project or external simulation for a client, I was tasked with going out and finding experts for that project.
So just to jump in real quick, could you, and it's obviously like a personal career thing, but could you describe how you got that promotion at all? Like, did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them, or was it kind of just organic? How did that transition from analyst to recruiter work?
I reached out to them. I just said, hey, I was interested if you have something else that I could do. And that's when Oren Kessler reached out to me and said, hey, I was under the impression they were expanding. That's what they told me, and they would be interested in hiring people. This will probably give a good example of the relationship, how it started out. But so I was originally told that it was going to be basically kind of a part-time basis, but it was going to be permanent. It was going to be continuous work, something like 20, 30 hours, a week. I would always have projects to work on. So I agreed. I signed up to be a recruiter. And then the next day, no joke, the next day, Oren emails me back and says, actually, no, it's going to be more like project-based. We're not always going to have stuff for you to work on. It's going to be more as needed. So that pretty much just was a good example of how that relationship would go on.
Can I just say that explains some of the Glassdoor reviews that we reviewed, which I almost, for a comedic element, I'm not gonna read them, but there were a couple of hilarious ones. Like, yeah, there's nothing better than getting a job only to be told the next day you kind of have a job, but you had already worked there, obviously. But I'm sure still you were like, what's my role here?
Yeah, pretty much.
Were you full time at that point, or was this still like when we need you?
Project based, yeah. Just whenever they need me. They actually, what's interesting is for the first half of 2017, they actually did have a lot of work. They had some months I had like 2 or 3 projects at a time, but then, as you all know, everything just shut down in the middle of 2017 about. I think the last thing, as I recall, the last project I worked on at that time was like May, I think, in April or May of 2017, and then just everything went dead, just completely dead until the end of 2017. I believe it was like November, December of 2017. So I didn't know at the time why that was, but obviously I later found out what had happened, which is an interesting story in and of itself. Can I go ahead? Can I go ahead and jump in? Okay.
Absolutely.
So it was April, I can't remember the exact date, but it was April of 2018. I get a LinkedIn message from a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. And they asked me, they said, we'd like to interview you about Wikistrat. And I think, okay, maybe Wikistrat got back in the news for some reason for a project they had done or something. And so I call the reporter, and the reporter, asked me, what's your name? Do you work for Wikistrat, right? And I say yes. And then she says, are you aware that Wikistrat is being investigated by Robert Mueller for interference in the 2016 election? I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's how I found out. No joke. That is how I found out about all this. And I basically just got off the phone. I said, I'm sorry, I can't talk about this. I don't know anything. Hung up the phone. I immediately Skype Oren and ask him about all this. And he basically just blows it all off, says it's nothing. And so that was a real interesting experience. And so anyway, after that happened, that was the first time I became really concerned, because the biggest shock of all of this to me is that Wikistrat ever had any real influence with anyone. Wikistrat was an interesting concept. Gamified crowdsourced consulting. That really is an interesting idea, but I never really, and Wikistrat clearly had connections. I knew from the beginning that they had connections with some pretty prominent people, but there's a big difference between having connections with people and having actual influence. And the more I've thought about it, I don't, and this is just a guess on my part, speculation on my part, but I don't think they actually had much influence before 2016. Like, I think that's when they actually got their big break. But
Let's talk.
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Let's talk about that. So, you go to Wikistrat's webpage, just bringing it back a little bit to the beginning, and it describes itself as the world's first crowdsourced consultancy. I know you guys covered this, but just, maybe for some people who are hearing this all for the first time, client A is interested in, let's say, what would happen if Kim Jong-un was no longer the head of North Korea. Analysts work in some sort of, it looks kind of like Facebook or Reddit. They game out the scenario, and then a report is produced. Is that kind of how it works? Okay.
It's that's a good comparison. Reddit. It's basically it uses a message board. The big difference though is it uses a gamification system. So when you post something, when you write something on the website, you get points for it, and the point system. I don't know exactly what the specifications of it. I've always thought it kind of looked like a word count to me.
Right.
But you get so many points, and basically the more points you accumulate, the higher you can actually level up. You can rank up, and if you gain a higher rank, if you get more points, you supposedly have a better chance of being chosen for paid projects.
There is sort of I did find when we were working on this story, there was a comical aspect of, Scott and I still are unclear, or at least I'm unclear. I mean, do Wikistrat's analysts are they paid well? Are they paid at all? I mean, this point system, can you just break that down for us?
So basically, the only thing they're really paid, well, they are actually paid for, there are a couple ways they can get compensation. One is for participating in an external simulation. Another is if they find clients and bring clients to Wikistrat. Those are, I'm trying to think. I think if they get a published article in the news, they can, of their own work and bring press for Wikistrat. I think they also can get compensation that way. So there are a couple different options. Another one is if they propose a simulation that's accepted and can successfully interest a client. But yeah, it's largely, a lot of it's unpaid. Um, it's basically it's effectively a giant experts pool that they can
Right.
draw on.
There's something very strange about that to me right away, because I know that these, at least in the beginning, so there, if you go to the web page, there's U.S. government has been clients. I I'm sure at least at the beginning, gave a fair amount of money to a pool of like unpaid analysts. I mean, right away, it doesn't that's not normal in this line
Like
of
you would
work.
assume that the U.S. government has a little bit better analysts than, you know, a private company in Wikistrat that, you know, the vetting process isn't the strongest.
So maybe from there we can move to, now we've discussed what the public persona is, but I think actually, Scott, do you have any questions in regard to, now that we moved from the public persona, what we're interested in and what we wrote about? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so the main story that Matt approached us with was about Jamal Khashoggi, who, of course, was the Washington Post columnist who was murdered by Saudi agents in a consulate in Turkey. And so, just to set the scene a little bit, the founder of Wikistrat is a man named Joel Zamel, who also has a company side group that was investigated by Mueller as well. He's basically a social media expert kind of guy, very shadowy. There's one picture of him ever posted online. So he founded Wikistrat, and he owns the lion's share of the company still. And he, in 2017 and late 2016, was meeting with Saudi government officials, Trump transition officials, basically all over the world, but especially the Saudi leadership. He met in the United States with the Saudi leadership, in Saudi, I think in Madrid, and another place in Europe, to discuss strategy. But at least at one of these meetings, according to the New York Times, Zamel and the Saudis discussed assassinating political dissidents of the kingdom. So obviously Khashoggi would fall into that category, and we know that Khashoggi was a target of the Saudis for a long time. They were intent on either kidnapping him or killing him. And so Matt brought us this evidence that Zamel's company Wikistrat was speaking about recruiting Khashoggi for some sort of project that we still don't really know what it was all about. And this was just months before Khashoggi was murdered. So think about this. You have Zamel flying all around the world in 2017, meeting with Saudi agents, including one general who is on trial now for Khashoggi's murder. He essentially oversaw the plot. So Zamel's flying around the world meeting with these people, these Saudi officials who are implicated in the murder of Khashoggi. At the same time that Zamel's company, Wikistrat, is saying that they're recruiting Khashoggi for some unknown project. And Matt presented us with emails from Oren Kessler, who is a senior executive at Wikistrat, basically detailing that. And yeah, Matt, if you want to just talk about the communications that you got and this story from your point of view.
So in mid 2018, it was July, or I think the first week of July of 2018, Oren reached out to me and said that he had another project. What I was told was that they were forming an experts community for the Middle East, specifically for the Middle East. And he wanted me to concentrate on recruiting Saudis for it. I could recruit other Arab nationals, but they really wanted me to focus on Saudi Arabia. And both people living in Saudis in the country itself, but also expatriates. And he gave me an example of someone he wanted to recruit. And he specifically said, this is someone we've already recruited. Recruit more people like him. And the example he gave was Jamal Khashoggi. And at the time, I thought nothing of it. I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but at the time, I didn't even know who Jamal Khashoggi was. My area of expertise is not the Middle East; it's actually Europe, European history. So it was kind of anyway. I worked on this project for about 3 months,
And when you say, just sorry to cut you off, but when you say
Sure.
worked on this project, does that mean you were a recruiter at the time? You had already been
Yes.
promoted. You
Yes.
were reaching out to other potential analysts that might fit into this community. Is that what you mean by worked on?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And basically, we pretty much did most of our recruitment through LinkedIn. And so what I would do is, I would, use LinkedIn, search for anyone who could, work for our projects. And then I would send them a message telling them, briefly describing, what we were doing. And they would, if they responded with interest, I would send them a more detailed message and either ask them to just send me their CV and we could set up an interview, or in some cases we just, if they were interested, we'd look over their CV. If they fit, we would actually send them a registration link to a registration page, and they'd fill out all their information. And then after they submitted it, they would get their login information and could actually get on the site. That's our recruitment process. And so I recruited, I reached out to, I think it was something like well over 1,000 people. It was like 1,100 people, I think, in total. And we had some interest. One thing that was really weird about that project was from the beginning, I noted this. Usually our response rate, which is, whether it's positive or negative, our response rate for a given project is usually about 15%, 20%, something like that. This project, the response rate was like less than 5%. I mean, it was like no one was even responding to the email, which was really, really weird. And I, like I said, reached out to a lot of people living in Saudi Arabia, a lot of people, living in Europe, the United States. And anyway, so worked on that until October. And after Khashoggi was murdered, I remember when the story first broke, I looked at the name and I thought, that name looks really familiar. And I actually thought, okay, did I reach out to him for this project? And I searched the Excel list that I used to keep track of this, and nothing came up. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a coincidence. So then but it still kept bothering me. So I then checked my Wikistrat email account. I did a search of it, and sure enough, something popped up. But it wasn't a message to Khashoggi. It was a message from Orrin Kessler, and that's where I saw the email, because I'd totally forgotten. This is just how crazy this is. He had mentioned that name specifically, and it just went right past. I just did not, I didn't really think anything of it at the time. But after he was murdered, I just happened to remember that. And that's what started all of this. And, and then after I saw that, I emailed Orrin and I said, hey, Orrin, what happened? I remember you mentioned Khashoggi to us, what's going on? And Orrin said, he emailed me back and said, we actually thought about recruiting Khashoggi, but we ultimately didn't, which was he totally contradicted himself.
It's a 180. And that was within what, 3 to 4 months or so.
Yeah.
The official,
from early July to October, his story changes, and it's just the only thing I can figure is he totally forgot about the other email. I mean, it's just, I can't believe he would. I don't know what he was thinking, but and the truth is, at the time, I probably would have just thought, okay, this is just a really weird coincidence, and just gone about my work. But then he emails me right back and says, oh, by the way, could you reach out to these Al Jazeera journalists who are covering this story? And could you recruit them for this project? And I thought to myself, wait a minute. No, something's wrong, not right here. And then I immediately ceased all work on that project, because it just, it became very uncomfortable.
I'd like to, if we could, just highlight again, Wikistrat is a publicly, whatever you want to call them, crowdsourced consultancy. I saw in the Daily Beast article that Ken Klippenstein wrote, I think he called them a consultancy. But let's talk for a second about, because this is kind of in the middle, the three founders have the background is really in intelligence. Isn't that really what we're talking about here, Scott?
Absolutely. The many Wikistrat employees are former Israeli intelligence officers and officials, and certainly the leadership connected to Israeli intel this is an Israeli company, no matter what they say.
Right.
They have
it has a Washington address, but it's all run out of Israel.
Right.
exactly everything's run out of Israel, and the connections to Israeli intelligence are very apparent when you look at who works for the company.
There's three founders, Joel Zamel, Elad Schaefer, and Daniel Green are like the core of the company. And we know for a fact that Elad Schaefer is a former intelligence officer, right? And the other two, we're not. Everyone's a citizen of Israel. So just one thing I've been thinking about: you obviously have to serve in the army, right? So there's a strong possibility that everybody served in intelligence. That's not unreasonable, I don't think, although we don't know that for a fact. And that, again, bringing that back to what we're talking about here, on top of that, we also have the fact that Mr. Zamel's other company, Psy Group, was investigated by special counsel Robert Mueller for a plan that was not identical, but similar to what the Russian disinformation campaign. Let's bring that back to what we're talking about here now, which is that Matt, you've been working there at what point? Six years?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you, like a million times, you were working on a project, but this time you're asked to recruit. It was a different type of group, wasn't it, Matt? I mean, it wasn't like the other projects.
I mean, they wanted me to, they wanted me to recruit people from the Middle East, but they wanted me to focus on Saudis. Actually, there was a similar project we had run in late 2017 to recruit Jordanians for roughly the same idea. They were they were doing some sort of project to recruit Jordanian nationals for experts in the politics and the economy and the society of Jordan to gauge its stability. That's what I was told. So that's why when we did this project in the Saudi project in 2018, I didn't think anything of it at the time. Even after everything that's happened, I now kind of almost wonder if this was some sort of weird continuation of what happened in 2017, and what if and this is just speculation on my part, but what if they weren't just potentially spying, or something wasn't going on with Saudis, but they also were doing this with Jordanians. That was something else that crossed my mind, but
a key question that we have, the Daily Beast did a big piece, I'm sure you've read a million times, about Wikistrat, and they got a load of internal documents that basically show that Wikistrat was not only this public-facing, simulation-running company, but they were also gathering intelligence. Some of the internal documents say we have boots on the ground, we have informants. And this is nothing that Wikistrat says publicly. So you worked there for 6 years approximately. Did you ever witness any sort of intelligence gathering versus simulation running?
I honestly didn't see it myself, but you wouldn't really do that kind of work on the main page, the homepage itself.
Right. And so we should probably speak a little bit, just really quickly, about how compartmentalized Zamel and the three at the top, and maybe the top 5 or 6 executives, kept the company. And Matt, you can speak to that.
Sure. Well, one thing I do want to mention real quick, and this is just how history has its little ironies. Before I knew about any of this stuff involving the investigation with Mueller or anything, we ran a simulation, and I think it was like late 2017 or something like that, maybe even before that, maybe it was late 2016, talking about disruptive technology and the societal implications of disruptive technology. And one of the things that I and another analyst mentioned was using a WikiLeaks-like site to gather intelligence and disseminate it. And it's like, oh my God, I'm actually working for a company that could very well be doing just that. And my background actually is I received my master's degree in history. My thesis topic was the East German secret police and their informant network. So that was actually my background. And could you do, as far as what you're talking about with the Wikistrat platform itself, could you design a platform to gather information from informants, centralize it, and sort of like WikiLeaks, but run for a government or some sort of organization allied with the government. Yes, but, and this is the important thing, I don't think it would be a good platform for, say, your highest level of informants, like your top echelon informants, just because of security issues. Even if it is compartmentalized, there's still some serious risks you'd be taking. What it could be very useful for is for information that's not exactly top secret, but is an open source, that's closed information, that by itself isn't very useful, but in the aggregate, when you get this information from a lot of different people, in the aggregate, it could be very useful and could be very, very helpful and insightful. Just a quick example of this, the Stasi, the East German Secret Police, had the large, by per capita, they had the largest population of informants in the entire Eastern Bloc, even more than the Soviet Union had. And one of the things they used their informants for was sort of like Gallup. Because so many people are afraid to publicly state their opinion, but in private they might say how they really felt about the government or how the economy was doing or whatever. They would gather public information that way, or public opinion information that way. So anyway, getting back to what we were discussing, that's one application of that type of platform. But there are limitations to it, and if Wikistrat was neck deep in gathering information that way, that would probably be, if I had to guess, that would be the focus, would be gathering not necessarily top secret information, but stuff that not the average person wouldn't know or wouldn't have access to.
So just to be clear, you didn't see any of this intelligence gathering yourself, right?
No.
But you wouldn't, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you seen that it would be doubtful that they did such a thing.
It would make a lot of sense. And again, when you've got a lot of professionals, a lot of experts, a lot of people who used to serve in various former governments, it's not that hard to send them an internal message and say, hey, what do you think about this or that? Or and even the simulations we run themselves, even the internal stuff, the stuff just for us that's used to generate buzz, you generate a lot of useful information just from that, because you're dealing with a lot of people who have experience in whatever the topic is. And can give you a lot of insight that way. So even the semi-public stuff they did could have been very insightful. One of the concerns I've had with Wikistrat is I'm worried that the work we did at Wikistrat, the simulations, all that, fed into Joel Zamil's other companies like Psy Group and White Knight. That's been a concern of mine, especially after Daily Beast also did an article in early 2019 talking about the election simulation they did, the cyber mercenaries simulation that they did, and how hackers could use Twitter and use basically in the simulation they outlined a scenario that was very similar to what actually wound up happening. And so that's something I've always been curious about and this simulation was run, by the way, in 2015. It was run well before what happened in 2016 actually happened. So that's been one of my concerns, is that somehow our work might have fed into Zamil's other companies. Like, I think it actually kind of lines up nice with the intelligence cycle that any intelligence service would use. You've got your basic data gathering, data collection, but then you have a refinement process and turn it into actionable intelligence. And then finally you have some, you actually carry out the operation, whatever the operation is. And I think there's a possibility, and I stress this is just speculation on my part, the Wikistrat may have been the beginning of that process, the actual data gathering and, the beginning of the refinement process that could have been turned into something more substantial. It's something like Psy Group or White Knight.
Well, and just to highlight, Wikistrat was founded before Psy Group and White Knight, right? Scott, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So
that's a completely fair thing. And I also want to highlight, I know one of the areas of concern that we had, like I think, Matt, like you said at the beginning of this show, the concept is crowdsourced consultancy. Yeah, totally. I could even see that being a good idea if I was some government agent, I want to find something out. Hey, great. We got this internal system. That makes sense to me. But the area, what's so concerning is the background. Joel Zammel, who literally was detained by special counsel Robert Mueller. Scott, his devices were seized, right?
That's right.
It's the background and that combination. And then what we're talking about here with Khashoggi, it doesn't line up. I mean, there has to be just something's going on.
What's heartbreaking to me is Wikistrat itself, crowdsourced consulting, gamified crowdsourced consulting, really is such a good idea. It has a lot of very, very useful, beneficial applications. And to think that it could have been misused in this way, to me, that's very heartbreaking. That is very heartbreaking. And like I said, I mean, only time will tell. Hopefully we can gather more information and figure out exactly what happened and if they were involved somehow in Khashoggi's disappearance and death, bring that to light. If not, there's still a lot of concerning things about the way that place operated that bother me. And I don't know. Hopefully, I've heard it said innovation's a lot like a SWAT team bursting through the door of a house. The guy who first comes in is the person who's most likely to get shot, but the other people who come in are the most likely to prevail. And that's very much like innovation is. The first company to try something new it absorbs all the risk. And the subsequent companies that come along are the ones that ultimately are most likely to be successful because they've learned the lessons from the first company. And I think one of the most important lessons that anyone can take away from a Wikistrat, no matter how this ends, is that you need to define very carefully what it is you're doing. If you want to have a crowdsourced consulting firm, fine, do that. If you want to have some sort of online intelligence gathering platform that's semi-public, do that. But the thing is, you can't overlap those two functions. You have to design the websites very, very differently for obvious reasons, for security reasons, for efficiency reasons. And I don't know. I think it's possible that Wikistrat started out with very much the intention to just be a crowdsource consulting firm, and maybe along the way that changed for one reason or another. Sorry, go on.
80%. No, I was just going to say, is it 70 or 80% of their clients are foreign governments?
That's what I've read. I don't know. I never knew who the clients were, and a lot of these just to show you how they operated. If you were selected for an external project for a client, you almost never knew who the client was. They were very, very careful about keeping that secret. And I mean, to be fair, I sort of see the confidentiality issues there, but at the same time, it's like if you're an analyst working on this, you really do. It is something you really do need to know. It is information I think your employer really should give you, just in case there's any ethical concerns you might have. So
I talked to another senior executive formerly there who said the exact same thing, totally compartmentalized, like just they went about their business, did their job to the best of their ability, but they basically didn't know what the senior management was up to. And it sounds like that was sort of your experience, really.
Yeah. And I wasn't just a basic analyst. I was actually doing relatively speaking, regular paid work for them. And even, and I think you really had to get to the executive level at the very top before you had any idea what was really going on there. I mean, I've heard the same thing from some of my colleagues who are, I obviously don't want to say their names, but very well-known people, very prominent people who had the same experience. Like they just didn't know what was really going on. I mean, I remember reading one story that, speaking of which, that anytime, Joel Zammel was in a room and someone brought out a camera, he would run out. If there was ever a real life version of Kaiser Soze, it really would be Joel Zammel. I mean, this guy, it's really kind of interesting how he was able to just totally keep himself offline.
And that's what's interesting about the whole Khashoggi story, is that we only know what Zammel has been doing the past few years because of incredible journalism, like at the New York Times and other places, and the Daily Beast. And that's when we learned that he's actually meeting with these Saudi people that killed Khashoggi. Like, it's General Asiri is on trial right now in Saudi Arabia for the murder of Khashoggi, and he was meeting with Zamel all the time. So that compartmentalization, it really is dangerous. When only a select few people know what's going on. Like Matt, for you didn't know that the owner of the company that you worked out was, meeting with General Asiri, who in the kingdom, who's not known for their human rights. So that level of secrecy is really damaging.
And it speaks to a larger problem in the consulting industry itself. I would argue that the industry we need to look at the regulations surrounding consulting in general, because I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a consulting firm, it doesn't have to be a crowdsourcing consulting firm, just any consulting firm. And you think, okay, I want to produce products that people are going to read, people are going to buy. And so you get a group of experts. Let's say you've got a country that's unstable. And you think, okay, I'll write a report on the factors that can lead to instability in that country and what could happen in that country in the near future. So I get a group of experts together, they work on it, and they, go through the different scenarios and possibilities. Maybe one scenario is something like, maybe there's going to be a coup in this country, and go through all the factors that could cause that and cause it to happen. Maybe there'll be a civil war in this country and all the factors that could cause it to happen. And then they sell that report. And what if one of the buyers for that report is, say, a general from that country who's interested in launching a coup? You've now potentially told that general how to do it
right.
through your work. And so I think we need to better define, okay, what is consulting? What is just producing an intelligence report that not necessarily is not meant to be a how-to guide. What are the regulations there? What are the liabilities there? How can we hold people accountable if they're not doing their due diligence to sell this stuff abroad and not really, paying attention to who they're working with or who they're selling to?
There's two things that really stand out to me about Joel Zamel. One, that he met with Trump Jr. and Scott, who was at the meeting again?
It was Trump Jr., Eric Prince, George Nader, and am I forgetting anybody?
It's all the favorites, so close enough.
I think that's right. I think
Steve said Eric Prince. Yeah,
Eric Prince.
Stephen, not Stephen Miller. Anyway, those were the core four.
It was some of our favorites that they came here and that he came here and pitched a plan to interfere in an American election. The second, that he attended a meeting with General Asiri and some other people where they proposed assassinating dissidents, and then didn't a normal person, what I think is a good citizen, all of us, you're at a meeting like that, your next call is to the FBI.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care. So,
well, the response, according to the New York Times, was the Saudis brought up using private intelligence firms, like the ones that Zamel has many, to assassinate political dissidents.
Right.
And Zamel's move, according to the New York Times, was to call his lawyer to see if that was somehow legal.
Right.
The lawyer came back and said, no.
Right.
And so that's, according to the New York Times, that's when Zamel said, no, we can't do that. Not based on any sort of ethical considerations, but after he spoke with his attorney.
Right. And
that's what the public story is, that he said he didn't, who knows.
Correct.
What happened.
That's true.
Correct.
That's true. And that brings us to Wikistrat, and then the what we call the KSA project, which is, given what we just spoke about the biography of this man, is it really believable that that's something we can't, we only know what we know, and we always have to be careful. But given that, what we just described, is there any good intentions that would come out of a project like this? It doesn't seem like it.
I mean, what I was told, that this was supposed to be a community of Saudi experts. I just assumed we'd had Middle Eastern community experts before, but the difference is we actually had a Middle East experts community a couple years ago, but it kind of become defunct. It was largely, as I recall, largely people who were from the United States or from Europe, not a lot of a lot of Arab nationals, not a lot of Saudi nationals. So I honestly assumed, because that was actually one of my big goals as a recruiter at Wikistrat, was to try and increase diversity there, because, for a consultancy, to be fair, it does have more diversity than a lot of your more traditional consulting firms, but it was still heavily people from the United States, from Europe, not a lot of people from the global South. And so that was one of my goals, was to get more people like that into the firm. But I don't know. That was my assumption, was that they were, or that's what I was told, was that they were just rebuilding that. But once all this stuff started coming out, I didn't really. When I became the most concerned was when that story that you just referenced came out, right? Because then then it suddenly became, okay, this is not just necessarily a coincidence. This could be something more serious, and that's when I started reaching out to reporters. That would have been like in late November of 2018.
So when you got that second email from Oren Kessler to say, hey, can you recruit these Al Jazeera journalists who are now covering Khashoggi's murder, you stopped working on the project, correct?
Yes.
And did you ever hear from anyone in the community of what happened to that project? Did anything come of it?
So I didn't hear anything about it after that. I actually, a couple months ago, I started reaching out to the people who registered for it. And
we can actually, if you don't want to, we can actually say that we've reached out to a bunch of people that were recruited by yourself. Like you said, there's 1,000+ people, and everyone that we got in contact with who received instructions and wanted to sign up for this Saudi project. I think we're up to double digits now. 10+ people have told us that they never got any further instruction. They clicked on the link to sign up, as you said, is normal in the recruitment process. And after they gave their details, they clicked on the link, they signed up. That was it. They never heard back. And Matt, I don't know if you can speak to how irregular that is.
That's very irregular.
Based on your,
that's not usually that step that they send you the link, the registration link. That's usually the last step. And then after you click on that, fill out your information, submit it, they then send you your login information. That's typically how we do those types of projects. So when I started hearing back from people that no one ever sent their login information, they heard nothing further from Wikistrat, that's when I became extremely concerned, because that's not typical at all. That's very weird.
And you would know. Sorry, Eric.
No, go ahead.
I mean, you would know, Matt. That was your position.
Yeah.
I mean, this is someone with credibility. This was the recruiter. You were recruiting people for this project and seeing them through into the community. So for you to say that these analysts and these scholars and professors who got recruited for this project, they never saw anything again, that is highly irregular, and you would be the person that would know that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Matt, it was called the KSA project. Did it have a title, or that's what we read?
I think they called it. I called it that. It was actually what I was told was it was a Middle East community, or Middle East experts community page website. They wanted me to focus on, like I said, recruiting Saudis, but I think I've sent you this the site the site that shows different communities. Like there was one for Saudi Arabia, there's one for Jordan, there's one for Pakistan, I think, and so there was one for all the major countries of the Middle East. And just to backtrack for a second, you look at the current situation in the Middle East, the volatility and the proxy wars going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the two primary players in that. And you also, on top of that, have the current situation between Israel and Palestine, and Trump's trying to push his deal of the century. And what you have is the Israelis opening up very formal lines of communication and diplomacy with these other Arab countries. That's never happened before, other, obviously, than Egypt. And now, of course, Israel's been working with a lot of these governments in secret for a very long time. That's nothing new. What's new is it becoming open and formal, and that is causing a lot of concern, a lot of anger a lot of people are in the Middle East are not supportive of that. And so that's one of my other concerns is as relations between Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all these other Arab kingdoms becomes more formalized, there's the risk of more domestic upheaval at home. And so there's a real marketplace for these companies like NSO Group, like potentially Wikistrat or Psy Group, Psy Group's gone now, but White Knight, to use various social media platforms to spy on people who could potentially be dissidents or potentially lead dissident movements. We've already seen that with NSO Group. I've been trying to get the story out for a year, but in some ways, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise that it's been so long. You know, it's been a year because all of this stuff with NSO Group, all the other, you know, the story about Zamel meeting with General al-Assiri, that's come out since then. So it's enabled the story to develop than if it had come out right in November of 2018. You know, a lot more people, I think, would have just assumed that this is just a weird coincidence. But now when you add all this other stuff that's happened since then, it paints a concerning picture. It's not, like I said, it's not a smoking gun. I've never once said it's a smoking gun, but it is concerning.
Matt, the background of everyone that you were asked to recruit for the KSA project, was that background, and we'll say what that is in a second, but was that typical? Was that unusual? Were there other projects where the people shared that type of background?
Not really. Usually we focused on recruiting people who had specific knowledge. They didn't really care what nationality it was. You know, if the topic was, you know, the stability of Russia, you know, could Russia collapse in a year or whatever? You know, they wouldn't focus on having me recruit Russians necessarily. They just people who had an expertise in Russia. So for me, this was kind of a weird project to be this and the Jordan project to be focused on people who are specifically nationals. You know, there are plenty of experts who are experts on Saudi Arabia or Jordan who don't live or aren't from those countries.
And that's interesting when you put it in perspective of the number is 75% of Wikistrat's clients are foreign governments. So we can only assume that the Jordanian government would want to know about Jordanians. Like, what other government would commission a report on another country's citizens? That doesn't make too much sense.
And they wanted to know about journalists, and they referenced that with a Middle East eye. All those, again, we don't know who the client was for this, but when Scott and I were reviewing that, I don't know if it was that email or what, I mean, we both said the same thing. This is a group of people that MBS absolutely hates and that despises. That's who that group was. And that's what's so concerning.
And another part of this was, okay, so, you know, can I go into like how Wikistrat's response when
Please
that article,
do, yes.
Okay. So when the article was about to come out, because you called Oren, right, for comments or something, or
we reached out to. So I mean, at that point, we weren't naming him because you were still remaining anonymous. But we did reach out to Wikistrat, Zamel's lawyers, and we covered our bases asking for comment.
Right, and they responded by basically they threatened to sue you, didn't they? As I recall.
Yeah, so we sent the Wikistrat.
To be fair, that is every day around here.
Yeah, it's happened quite a lot with us.
Go ahead.
But they sent us an email, and this is an important point in their timeline of what they say Khashoggi did with the company. So just to set this in timeline format, the first message you get, Matt, is, hey, we want you to recruit people, and this is a person we've recruited. His name is Khashoggi, Jamal Khashoggi. That's the first message. Khashoggi gets murdered by Saudi agents. Oren Kessler then emails you and says, no, we wanted to recruit Khashoggi, but that never happened. Okay, so that's the second data point. Thirdly, when we reached out to comment from Wikistrat, they say, yes, Khashoggi was an analyst within the community for many years. So they've flipped on this story now 3 times about what Khashoggi actually did for the company, and we at Forensic News have looked really hard and talked to a lot of people, and nobody has ever seen Khashoggi within the community. Nobody ever saw a post. Um, we've seen lists of every analyst in the Middle East community. He was never there. And so this constant changing of the narrative by Wikistrat has really, I think, from a journalist point of view, elevated the concern that we have, because we do have these internal emails where they're just saying the complete opposite of what they're saying now publicly.
And the weird thing to me is, if it was such a secret that he worked for us, at the time I was just a recruiter. I was not a manager. I was not a high level employee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand, if it was such a secret, why did they even bother mentioning to me when he had no reason to do it? He could have, if Oren wanted to give me an example, he could have just said Jamal Khashoggi, who I didn't know it was at the time anyway. You're taking a huge risk if MBS ever finds out that Jamal Khashoggi is working for you, because he's a prominent dissident of Saudi Arabia.
And just to say one more time, I know I've said this a million times, but Zamel at the time was flying around the world meeting with Saudi government officials. So it's very clear that we can say that Joel Zamel was in 2017 and 2018 in cahoots with the Saudi government based on who he was meeting with. That's
I gotta
very
say,
clear.
Matt, by the way, that's a great point that I never thought of. You're right. That would severely impact one's business. And we know these guys are, money's
foreign government funded, essentially.
You're right. I never thought about that. So it's kind of
you're not just risking your business with Saudi Arabia. You're risking your business with all of their allies. So you're risking it with your business with Jordan, with Kuwait, the UAE. That's a lot of risk to take on. Oh, and then by the way, you just happen to mention a low-level employee that he works for you. It's just like, I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and forth thinking these are either the dumbest people in the world I've ever known or the smartest. And I've kind of come to the conclusion, I think they're really good at the tech part of it. And apparently, I just think they're horrible at everything else to do. They're good at using social media to manipulate people, but not really good at anything else. They just another quick anecdote to show you how Wikistrat was run. I actually received another analyst pay for a project by mistake. They paid through PayPal.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to pay back Wikistrat for that really stupid sophomoric mistake.
I'm curious, how do they pay you if you don't mind asking?
Bitcoin?
Really? Wait,
I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing. That was me.
It's actually PayPal.
No.
Are you serious? It's actually PayPal?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
No, right? Hey. We had analysts. I had a guy recruited for a project who he didn't shoot me out, but he really he sent me this really long email about why you shouldn't use PayPal.
Yeah.
Pay people for your projects. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not my call. I can't.
Oh my God. Talk about operational security and how big of a flaw that is.
Wait, don't we use PayPal?
For Israeli. We're not talking to foreign governments around the world.
Matt, when you accidentally got that check, did it say fee for assassination or the wrong check?
No, fortunately it did
Sorry,
not.
Bad joke.
Bad joke. Can't help it sometimes. Yeah. Scott, there's so much we want to talk about here. And I'm far from done. Just so you guys know, we're in for the long haul. Scott, anything on your mind right now that we're covering a lot of ground here?
Yeah, I think we cover the Khashoggi stuff fairly well, and that's our main concern with this whole story, is figuring out why Wikistrat mentioned Khashoggi to Matt in the first place, and why this project, as far as we can tell, based on the people we talked to, never went anywhere and just died as soon as people clicked on that link. So that's the big question that we have, and that's why we're focusing on this so much.
Thank you for bringing that up. And that's still one of the most profoundly disturbing things. They clicked on a link and they never heard from from Wikistrat again. And that was not normal. That didn't happen, right?
And even before all the NSO group stuff came out, was it last month or the month before, I was concerned about that possibility well before after Khashoggi was murdered, after I started reading these articles about Zamel meeting with the Saudi general who ordered his death. I started becoming concerning that, that thought crossed my mind too, that maybe there was something in the link or some type of information that Wikistrat was somehow using to monitor these people. But then once that NSO group story came out last month, it just brought my concerns to another level, combined with, so many people who said they never heard back from Wikistrat after. And they put a lot of time, I put a lot of time and effort into this. So that to me seems like a lot of wasted man hours, unless something else was going on, unless there's some other reason for this project.
Scott, do you want to highlight just briefly, touch on what Matt was talking about, what the general consensus is on what the NSO group, what they do and what they were believed to have involved with Khashoggi?
Sure. So NSO Group is another Israeli company, and they developed the software called Pegasus, which they basically sell to foreign governments, and it allows them to essentially spy on who they want. So NSO's group is involved in the Khashoggi story because they have been found to have hacked into Khashoggi's closest associate's phone. His name is Omar Abdulaziz, and his phone was accessed by NSO Group for a period of time when he was obviously talking with Khashoggi and working on secretive projects with Khashoggi that the kingdom of Saudi Arabia would not have been happy with. So that's the involvement of NSO Group with Khashoggi, and we know that there are some slight connections between ZAML and NSO Group, though those aren't totally firm. But we know for a fact that this Israeli company, again, which is odd in itself, was helping the Saudi government, in the case of NSO, hacking into Khashoggi's friend's phone.
Yeah. Matt, I want to ask you too, I know you had limited contact, but is there, what was your general impression of the three, like Joel Zammel, Elad Schaefer, and Daniel Green? I don't know if you ever had any communication with them. I mean, did you ever talk to them, email? I mean, what do you think?
I talked to Daniel a couple times when I was having technical issues with the site, because that was what he did. He was the chief technical officer or chief technology officer. I think I don't even remember what it was, but I think I emailed Elad about some minor issue or something a while back. Oren was my main point of contact. Like I never really
speak about Oren and his position with the company and the contact that you had with him. And
Oren was when I reached out to him, like I said, in late 2016, asking if they had any extra work. I think at that time, as I recall, he was like the head of outreach. He was the head of community outreach or something like that, head of recruitment. And I asked if he had any other jobs I could do there besides just be an analyst, and that's when he offered me the recruitment job, the recruitment position. And from there on, he was my main point of contact at Wikistrat. Of course, he was, as we've said, he was the one who mentioned Khashoggi to me and brought up the Saudi project. He was my boss basically. Mm-hmm. Now he is the CEO of Wikistrat. He has been he was supposed to. This was kind of weird. He was supposed to take over as CEO at the beginning of 2019. From what I saw, it didn't look like he took over until sometime in mid 2019, like April-ish. I don't know. I could be wrong. It just seemed to me like he stayed on as the head of community outreach all the way up until. I mean, it seemed like there was some kind of weird delay in his ascension to CEO, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's just they didn't make it public for some reason until later. But anyway, he's currently the CEO, has been at least at some point since 2019. I don't know exactly what month, but he's the one I had the most contact with since after they basically shut down for a long time. Like I said, they restarted with the Saudi project, the Jordan Saudi project, and then I could tell at the beginning of 2019 they were just rebuilding everything. Like it's like It's like Frankenstein's monster. One minute you've got a dead husk, the next minute lightning strikes and you've got a living, breathing being. That's what it seemed like to me with Wikistrat at the beginning of 2019. It's like they just suddenly became very revitalized. They totally redid their website, brought on a new executive staff, and I don't know. You mentioned this in your article. I just found this out by accident. I was researching something else, and I happened to look up Wikistrat's public financial information. And that's when I noticed at the beginning of the first quarter of 2019, they received something like I think it was $78 million injection of some kind. I don't know. And that was really weird. It was like, and that was apparently how they were able to rebuild everything as quickly.
Right.
As
So
did.
if you look at their public financials on Zoom Info, they go from like a 20 million revenue in 2018, early 2019, and then all of a sudden Q2 of 2019 it shoots up to $100 million. So there was at least like a $70 million increase in revenue over one quarter, which seems to be, like you said, some kind of injection of cash somewhere.
And I read over, they had a newsletter, a year-end newsletter in 2018. They typically do every year. And they were talking about, they listed all the projects they were working on or had been working on. None of them looked like anything that could accumulate to that much money. I mean, like I've never, because they've covered their financials in previous articles. I think the New York Times and Daily Beast did stuff about this. And it's just, they were hemorrhaging money for years.
Yeah.
I think they took like $1 million losses or something. I mean, they took a lot of losses. And so I didn't see any projects in that newsletter. And I think I shared it with you, Scott. I didn't see anything that looked like a $70 million payday. I could be wrong, but I mean, nothing that looked.
And it's so secretive that nobody will ever know unless the very top share the records with somebody. But
one senior executive that I spoke with former executive said the same thing. He was like, I always got paid on time. I have no idea. Like it didn't even make sense to him. He's like, we're working on these projects, and this amount of money's coming in, and those things are not gelling. They're not that he had a direct line into what the fee was, but this, that was his job on the business end. He just did not get it.
Well, and that's part of the problem. Okay, so crowdsourced consulting can be potentially very disruptive to the consulting industry, but I don't think there are certain drawbacks to it. There are cost savings advantages to it, but there's also certain drawbacks. And number one, obviously, security issues. Number two is the business model, figuring out exactly how the business model is going to work. Because I don't think, I honestly don't believe that you can turn this into another Uber. That's not going to work. It's one thing to, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to Uber drivers or Lyft drivers, but it's one thing to drive someone from point A to point B. It's quite another story to be doing very complex research, analysis, and writing into some very, very complex issues. And you can't really just break that down into little micro tasks and assign it to people and pay people and micro payments. That just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. You're not going to, even if it did, you're not going to get very, very good work.
There is a comical aspect to this. We reviewed, you talked about earlier how you weren't sure if these people are good at anything except the tech end. And I'm not sure how much I want to get into this, but Scott and I were reviewing a related, I'm not even sure how much
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
follow your lead.
We reviewed another aspect of this story that was comically inept which maybe I'm being so vague here on the intelligence end of things, where I was actually almost arguing like this cannot be anything involved with Joel Zamel. It can't be this big player, but it was. So sometimes we do overestimate some of this stuff. And speaking of which, I wanted to also ask you, what was your reaction when you found out basically one of your bosses was detained by special counsel Robert Mueller. Like what goes through your mind when that happens?
Well, I found out on I think it was like a Tuesday afternoon. I think, as they say, you probably could have picked my jaw off the floor. I mean, I was shocked. And like I said, I was shocked these guys had enough influence to be detained by Robert Mueller. It was just, I mean, I don't know. There's still so much that's up in the air that I honestly don't know. And like you said, unfortunately, we may never know for sure, at least unless another whistleblower comes forward. And like I was saying earlier, if you want to design a web platform for doing this type of espionage work, you can do that. There are drawbacks to it. There are serious limitations to it, but you could do it. You can't design a crowdsourced consulting firm front for your information gathering platform. There are serious security problems with doing that. There's serious drawbacks to doing that. And from what I've seen, I'm no longer on the Wikistrat website, obviously.
Well, you're kidding.
Now that they hate you.
Yeah.
Well, you don't still work there?
No. I think effectively I've given my resignation letter. Maybe not officially, but
I think they gave you your resignation letter.
It's
been great, but unfortunately we're not going to be doing this.
It's not been great now.
I forgot to mention this. By the way, Oren, I quit, just in case you didn't know that yet.
What was your impression of Oren? Like, I'm sure you corresponded with him a lot. Did he seem like a good guy?
Other than the lying, he was a very nice boss.
Yeah.
Other than the lies, yeah, he was a very, very professional, nice boss. Other than, like I said, telling me one thing 1 minute and then about facing the next minute.
And who even knows if he was at the end of the, someone could be pulling his strings on the other end. So we don't know if he was involved in any of this, and we should say we don't know if Wikistrat at all was involved in any legal wrongdoing or anything like that.
That's true. And I've never made that claim. I've never
exactly.
Once made that claim.
Right.
Yeah, this is just a whistleblower who saw wrongdoing and suspicious activity, we should say. And we hope the story just gets picked up and shines more light on what we think could be some very dark corners.
Matt, did the company say anything the day that Joel Zamel or when it got out that he was detained by Mueller and his devices were seized? I mean, did anyone say anything, or was it just another day at work?
No. I found out when I was contacted by a Wall Street Journal reporter. That was how I found out. And it's just, it really comes down. I get there are a lot of people that work at Wikistrat, but how hard is it to send out an email doing what you've done all along, which is basically, say one thing and do another, just say, okay, you're going to see this stuff in the papers about Joel Zamel. Just ignore it, just come up with some line of crap about, it's fake news or whatever. That's not hard to do. And the fact that they couldn't even be bothered to do that just shows you the level of respect they have for their employees.
And
go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
While we're talking about respect, like one of the sentences that they said in their statement to us when we asked for comment was something along the lines of, we mourn Jamal's death and it was such a tragedy. Well, their claim is that he was an analyst within the community for years and years. Why wasn't there a public statement issued? Why wasn't there any subsequent analysis, any simulation, any piece, any press release about Khashoggi's murder and how, inhumane his final hours were? If he truly was, and if this was above board, and he truly was just an analyst working on crowdsourced consultancy matters, then you would expect a statement like that from the company.
Right.
I'll go one step further than that. I will mention this guy's name because it's on his LinkedIn profile, what he does. Matthew R.J. Brodsky worked for us. You can look up on his LinkedIn. It says he's a senior Middle East consultant or Middle East expert with Wikistrat. Shortly after Jamal's death, he released an opinion piece basically calling him a terrorist. Basically
Yes,
calling him a terrorist.
I saw that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's me and I'm running a consulting firm and I have an analyst who was just brutally murdered, and one of my other analysts is writing stuff like that. I think I'd take him aside and say, just for the next 6 months,
Yeah.
keep your mouth shut about this. Don't say this, because this was a guy who worked for us, and he was murdered in a brutal fashion. Show some respect.
Didn't you also say that analysts could earn money by writing articles that got picked up?
I believe so. That was one of the potential ways that they
Interesting.
It will generate press for Wikistrat, I think is the way they put it.
Okay. Do you know if
and
that
one of-
Brodsky article mentioned Wikistrat at all, or was that just his own personal?
I think it was his own personal.
Okay.
I don't think it was tied to Wikistrat itself. No, I don't.
Okay.
Think so.
I read that too when we were researching this article, and it was actually hard for me to get through that because I could tell from the first two paragraphs kind of the way it was going to go, and I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" Like,
well, that's the other weird thing. Okay, why, if you think Jamal Khashoggi is little more than a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer, why would you work for a company that would hire him?
Mm-hmm.
That's my big question to Matt or to anyone at Wikistrat who didn't like this guy. And truth be told, supposedly he was an analyst with them for years and years. No one remembers them. So it's just, I don't know. It's that's probably what bothered me the most. Like you were saying, that this guy's brutally murdered, and Wikistrat can't even be bothered to issue a statement of condolence or any type of sympathetic statement.
Right, and all these,
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
all these data points really just lead up to Wikistrat has created a cover story for what their involvement was with Khashoggi, because we've spent now months looking into if he ever did anything for the company, one piece of paper, and we can't find it. And that's not to say it isn't out there. Maybe he did do some project for them that was super secretive for years and years and years. But based on the info that we know, we can say that Wikistrat has created this cover story. And the big question is why, right? Like, why are they going to these great lengths to say that Khashoggi was an analyst when dozens of people that worked there never saw him? And that's the question we're trying to get answered, I think, is it just doesn't add up. And this whole story that he was an analyst within the community for years, it's simply not true based on the info that we have. So we want to know why.
And literally, Matt, that's something that we have, correct me if I'm wrong, we reviewed every Middle East analyst at Wikistrat, with thousands of names. It's not there. It's not there.
I mean, and that's, like I said, if they were trying to keep his identity a secret there, and so maybe they just, didn't have a public profile for him, or maybe they had some sort of avatar profile, which we don't do really, but hypothetically, I suppose that is possible. Like we talked about the compartmentalization of the site. But again, that goes back to my other question. Why did you even bother mentioning it to me if it was so secret? Right. Why did Warren say anything to me about this if it was so secret?
And so then
this cover story takes a huge hit just from that one question alone.
Exactly. Sorry. And then additionally, after Khashoggi's murdered, he asked you to go after more people that are critical of MBS, like within 2 weeks, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't look good. And I just wish they were honest, because we gave them a good opportunity. We sent them a very detailed list of questions, and they definitely lied a bunch of times. And we're still all ears. If they want to reach out and tell us what actually happened, we just want to tell what the truth was and the fact of Khashoggi's involvement with them.
And let me tell you a story that, what happened to me a couple of weeks ago. So I started reaching out to my fellow analysts, both who currently work at Wikistrat and those who aren't really associated with the company anymore. And I mentioned this, I talked to them about this. And I said, look, I'm not saying like I said, it's not conclusive, but I am concerned. What do you guys think? Wikistrat, I don't know, to this day, I'm not sure how they did this. They shut down my Gmail account because I wasn't using the Wikistrat Gmail account. I don't have access to that anymore. I was using my own personal Gmail account to reach out to these people, and Wikistrat shut it down. And they have hit me with it's not a cease and desist order, but they have hit me with a cease and desist. They threatened to sue me. And I know, look, at the end of the day, I know they're bluffing because they are afraid to get this into court. Nothing's happened since, so...
When you say they shut down your email, what happened exactly? It stopped working, or what?
Yeah. I couldn't log into my email. I had to. Basically, what they tried to say was they went to, I guess, Google and said that, I don't know, maybe they claimed I was giving out confidential information or something. I don't know.
Wow.
But they somehow got Google to shut down my Gmail account. I was able to get it back up. But they were able to shut it down for about a couple days.
And so if all of this is totally above board, why are they taking all of these actions, right?
Exactly.
This isn't how completely innocent people act.
At every turn, they've made themselves look worse. Every turn.
Yeah.
I know that when the whole time we were working on this article, of course, I was highly concerned. But when we got that response... and then just compared the inconsistencies with Khashoggi, that's when I was like, oh man, like this is something, like, I think we kept a very open mind, and Matt, so did you. And when we worked on it from our end, we really were like, hey, if there's an explanation here, we're going to hear it. And that's why it was such a good piece. And then, but when I saw that response and then the changing story, I was like, oh man, like my heart sank. I was like, man, something's really going on here.
Yeah, I think the first line. Sorry, Matt, I keep cutting you off. The first line or second line like attacked me personally. Yeah. Like I should bring it up. I'll bring it up right now because it's important to the story.
And Scott, while you're go ahead. Yeah, if you can, you must be bringing things up faster than I can. Go ahead.
I was ready. To roll. So here's how they start the response to us asking for comment on this Khashoggi story. As you know, the company came under a wave of media scrutiny and speculation over the past year, raising to the level of ridiculous conspiracy theories and absurd allegations. You are already responsible for publishing some of these stories with an incredibly high proportion of false claims connecting totally unrelated dots. Wow. So that's how they started that's how they prefaced their answers to us.
Right. It's like the oldest thing in the book, attack us. And since then, we haven't heard from them, right?
Nope. And we've followed up. We've asked more questions because we have an evolving list of questions of them. Right. But no, we haven't heard anything since.
So we were attacked, threatened, and then nothing, right? And doesn't that really say it all? Doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think so. Man, this is the longest podcast ever, by the way. This is the longest.
Yeah, we should do some wrap up thoughts just so we don't go crazy here.
I would just like to say it's like, you watch, I'm a big fan of crime documentaries, but if you watch crime documentaries or Law and Order, just to summarize the way I see this, it's like, okay, you've got a murder victim and there's someone that you've been told knew the murder victim. So you're a homicide officer. You go up to the person who supposedly knew the murder victim. You ask him, this person's been killed. Did you know them? And the person says, yes, I did. You come back a week later, talk to them again, and you say, oh, by the way, did you know this murder victim? And they say, oh, no, actually, I didn't know them. Then you come back a third week, and they say, oh, actually, I did know the murder victim after all. And then to top it all off, another suspect in the crime had a connection with the person you've been talking to, the suspect you've been talking to. That's basically this story in a nutshell.
That is an incredible way to round it up. Let's clip those 90 seconds and let's. That was great. That's great.
Yeah.
I think I do. Scott, is there anything else you wanted to ask? I think I maybe have one or two quick questions.
You can take it. Go for it.
I do want to ask you, Matt, did anything else ever stand out in your time working there? Projects, just something looking back on it now that we should know about?
I mentioned the Cyber Mercenaries project. I will say this, in mid 2018, about June, July of 2018, maybe May, they took a bunch of internal simulations off the site. And to this day, I'm not really sure why. Some of them, maybe I could see why they didn't want them to stay on there. One was about a post-Obama Middle East, and there were a couple other ones that I could see maybe could raise some controversy. But there were some that in my mind, there was no reason to take them off. And they could have had legitimate reasons for doing this. I honestly don't know. But that was a weird thing to do. And of course, it's the height of all this controversy. So I don't know if it's connected. But that was something that was kind of strange to me. Yeah. They've since totally sanitized their site, by the way. They've redone it. They basically moved it to be, in my mind, to look more like a site that is, like I said, a site more for gathering information. It's even more compartmentalized than it was before.
And they still have clients. They just did some. They have some kind of partnership with NYU.
Yeah,
it's like
that's a yearly project they do. It's predictions for the coming year. Dr. Maya Aziz, I think, is the one who runs that.
Do you think people in the general, like let's say NYU or just the general community, I mean, are they aware of what we're talking about right now? I mean, this is some serious stuff.
I've been trying. Look, I first reached out to a reporter about the Khashoggi thing in, like I said, late November 2018. I've been trying to get this story public for a year. And I'll tell one kind of really heartbreaking part of it. There was one journalist I approached. They were real interested in doing this. They were good friends with Khashoggi. I don't want to say the person's name, obviously, but they were literally probably less than 24 hours away from running it. Their editors killed it the last second. And this journalist was very devastated. They really were. They killed it. And I reached the reporter I first reached out to about this, by the way. I asked this reporter, like, why didn't they? This seems newsworthy. It seems like interesting. Why didn't you go with it? And the reporter told me that their editors didn't want. They killed it, basically.
And that's the main reason, honestly, why we started Forensic News, because we wanted to not have that person breathing down our neck. And I think we as a team have good judgment as it is. So it's kind of a perfect marriage that we found each other with this story. Because there are publications, like you said, that have an editor come in at the last minute and say, sorry, I think I jumped out of there.
Scott, that was funny. Yeah, we were just, I don't know how much of that you heard. I was saying we were good for 90 minutes, and then finally I knew something would happen.
No, I got a new mouse and I hit a button.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, nice. So it wasn't the connection. It's fine.
No.
Matt, I believe you were saying, I forgot what you were saying. It was something important.
I honestly lost my train of thought there too, but no, it's just, let me make one thing very clear. The Wikistrike community is a huge community, and I really do believe the vast majority of them knew nothing about any of this. They're very good people. I enjoyed my time on this site. I enjoyed working. I got to work with some top-notch experts. Got to make some great connections. And that's part of the reason I'm doing this, because if people's lives are potentially in danger because of this site, or can be very negatively affected because of the site, I want people to know. I want something to be done.
I remember. Yep.
Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. I was just going to say, I remember we were talking about the journalist a journalist was 24 hours from running this and their editors killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's so frustrating. Having something I think is, and I think you guys would agree, is newsworthy. I mean, like I said, we haven't, this is nothing that's libelous. This is something that, obviously Wikistrat has confirmed, and it is a very concerning connection. And I think, it's something, considering how big this story was, especially in late 2018, it's something that you would think would get primetime coverage in every newspaper. But no, it's just, I reached out to basically every major newspaper about this, and this is the first public airing of this that it's gotten, and that's just, it's mind-boggling to me.
I have to be honest though, it's their loss was our gain, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. No, it really was.
And I think we did. I think we did get the snowball rolling because we've heard off the record from a couple journalists that are interested in maybe confirming this. So we definitely want to keep the story alive as much as we can. And I think that was one of our main goals in even publishing was like, hey, the New York Times has a lot more resources than we do. If we get the ball rolling here, maybe they can pick it up. And that's still one of our goals, and we're working on that actively.
Yeah. And if maybe we could just close on this, like, well, actually, before I do that, do you gentlemen, either you have any, especially you, Matt, any closing thoughts? Yeah. I was just going to say, like, I was thinking about, like, if you have two men leading different lives, you have a Joel Zamel and a Jamal Khashoggi. And I think what we're talking about here is like, in a, maybe this is a generalization, but like, which one of those people do you want to be like in this life? Right. Like it's the question answers itself. So that's what brought all of us together, I think.
And yeah, and just building off that, like a lot of times the ethical considerations get thrown out the window, right? Because we're always looking at what charges could potentially come. But a lot of this is just like, imagine sitting in a room where Saudi government officials say, hey, we want to kill people that disagree with us. Can you help us? And your response isn't to leave the room and call the FBI. Like just on a human level, I think the transparency of this story is important. And I hope we did a good job doing it. And I hope there's more light to be shown in the future.
One thing I want to say is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Matt.
I think, like I said before, Wikistrat, gamified crowdsource consulting, it's a great idea. It really is a great idea, and it can do a lot of good. And, I really do hope that, some future company can come along and, take the ideas that Wikistrat came up with, but do something good with it, not this espionage stuff that has, just from a practical standpoint, has no place in a crowdsourced consulting firm.
Right.
Because it is a great idea. It is a great idea.
A generalist theory proposes assassinating dissidents. Your first thought shouldn't be, let me call Mark Mukasey.
Yeah.
To see what, like,
yeah.
Oh man. Well, gentlemen, it's been quite a 90 minutes. Really, just so great for all of us to finally talk. Matt, step out into the sunlight.
Thank you so much for the work you guys have done. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for coming forward. We appreciate it, and I think it's going to do some good for the world eventually, even if it's not immediate. So thank you again, Matt.
Yeah, and to all those listening, of course, it's at forensicnews.net. And hey, I even wore the T-shirt today.
Go grab some merch while you're at it.
Like they say, always be closing, or as Malcolm Nance once said, always be collecting intelligence.
There you go. There you go.
Scott Stedman, Matt Penn, it's just been just such a great afternoon, and I can't wait till the next one.
Thank you very much.